Is a thread stand like this going to damage your sewing machine? Potentially it is. First I'm going to tell you why you might want one of these, then what it can do to your machine, and finally what you can do to avoid the damage. If you have one of these styles of machine that have the spool pins like this, over time this part will deteriorate, and at some point when you're pushing or pulling on your spool pin it will descend into the machine because this has just fallen to pieces. It may be that you need 2 of them and you don't need anything else done, and by the time you pay for a technician to fix that and put those new parts in, you would have been better off just getting one of these stands. That's one reason why you might be doing it. Another reason you may be looking at getting one of these thread stands is that your machine has a horizontal spool pin, but the thread has a really big hole in it. If that's the case, this thread won't sit on a horizontal spool pin. Maybe you need something vertical. Maybe you've got an embroidery machine and you'd like to buy the really big and economical reels of embroidery thread. Once again, it's not going to work on a horizontal spool pin. It's too big. And then you would want one of these thread stands. Perhaps you're into quilting. I like to buy the King Tut big reels of thread because they're cheaper. But they've got the big hole in them and they're too big to fit in a machine. So I really need to have them on one of these vertical thread stands. The first thread guide on a lot of machines is plastic. If the thread guide on your machine is metal, the first one, then these thread stands are not a problem for you. The first thread guide in my Memorycraft 10,000, like my 15,000, is also plastic. So it's an issue with these machines as well. You may be able to hear as I run my nail along there that there are some rough patches, and in fact there's one patch where I get stuck. That is the beginning of a divot in that plastic. The divot in my DC 3050 is even bigger. And there is the divot in my DC 3050. The bigger that divot gets, the easier it is for the thread to slide into it. And over time, just like wind or water going over a rock, it will erode it away even further. Eventually you end up with a situation where there's quite a huge crack in that thread guide on the machine, and it mucks up all your tensions. So what can we do about it? Because I really do want to be able to use the thread stand. First, make sure you move the stand reasonably regularly. Move it into a different direction so it's not always stressing the plastic in the same place. Next, there are a few little things you can add to your sewing machine that make things better. If your sewing machine has a hole like this for putting a spare spool pin in, and I haven't got the right spool pin here, I've got a circular one and this machine should have a square one, but what you can do is put the spool pin holder here with that thread around it. Don't press it in too hard, give it plenty of room to move, but it will hold it down low enough for your thread guide not to be at risk. Another thing you can do is get a paper clip and have the thread going through a paper clip and attach the paper clip to your machine down here. That will be also holding the thread low enough that even though it's coming from quite up high on the thread stand, it will be low enough when it's going through the thread guide. You could do the same sort of thing with the back end of a safety pin. It just means that you need to use that as your first thread guide as you go onto your machine. One of the things to be sure of though is don't get too close to the flywheel. I would not be attaching a safety pin or a paper clip to this end of the machine. It's far too easy to end up with the thread going in here to the flywheel and ending up all around the shaft. So you really need to have it a bit further away from the flywheel. If the first guide of your machine is plastic, please be aware that having your thread coming from odd places can have an impact on how the machine operates. If the first guide is metal, it won't really matter. Be aware that if you have one of those racks that sits behind your sewing machine, particularly for people who do a lot of embroidery, that can do the same kind of thing, and you need to give some sort of help to your machine so that you don't wreck the first guide. Hope you've learned something today, and I shall see you next time.